Alright. So, with this we will now move into lecture 17, which I have put as fantasy cities and a question mark on this. So, understanding limits of smart, eco and green doctrines through what I say the case study based approach. So, I will be kind of deploying the case study based approach to basically flesh out fallacies and exclusions within this kind of doctrines like smart, eco and green cities. So, I will be covering actually 3 case studies Dholera, Lavasa and Rajarhat so that you can have a better and consolidated understanding of the exclusions that these kind of discourses actually entail. So, yes, we will be discussing limits of the smart city discourse here through the application of the case study based approach. So, which I call case study based approach. So, we will take a detailed look into some of these plans, the cities which have been or which are being planned as smart cities. So, they are there will be a whole lot of investments to kind of develop these areas or these spaces as smart city, and some of the cities are also, for example, Lavasa is actually kind of mentioned as the eco city. And here in this particular lecture I will also be talking about the slippery ontologies, that how different terms and terminologies are actually used interchangeably to also suit the larger political economic needs and imperatives of the statecraft. So, here I would be specifically focusing on Dholera, and across these 3 lectures, this one and the next 2, that is lecture 18 and 19, this will be the key question that whether this is smart or utopian or fantasy cities. So, here focusing on Dholera, let us first get into some of the basic or fundamental information and facts. So, the first important information is that Dholera is the first new smart city emerging in the western state of Gujarat, and it is also hailed as the model on which the other 99 smart cities of India would actually fall back upon. And it has been master planned by the UK based global consultancy firm called Halcro, and it is partially paid by the finance is will be taken care of or is being taken care of by the Indian state and several Japanese corporations. And the idea is to develop the Dholera Smart City, if traversing across 920 square kilometer. So, by 2040, 920 square kilometer will be ready as the Dholera Smart City, and if you can see, this is twice the size of present day Mumbai. So, it is a big space, right. So, and again I am quoting from Ayana Datta. So, I have drawn a whole lot of information from Datta's research, Ayana Datta's research on Dholera, which came out in Guardian and which also came out in dialogues in human geography. So, and the reference is of course there in the reference list, and Datta says that Dholera promises to be a new city without the annoyances of everyday urban life. And I think this is true not only for Dholera, but several other smart cities or planned smart cities and eco cities like Rajarhat and green cities like Rajarhat and eco cities like Lavasa, because these kind of promises, they really to a great extent are empty promises, because they do not really they do not highlight or bring to the fore annoyances of everyday urban life. So, the situatedness remains absolutely missing from this kind of otherwise techno managerial perspective or approach. So, let us take a look into the geographical and ecological details of this particular village called Dholera. So, I know on the name of which the Dholera Smart City has actually been planned. So, in this map you can actually locate Dholera, and it is a small village located, and it is low lying ecological area of the Gulf of Kambad on the Arabian Sea in the western Indian state of Gujarat, and it is one of the 22 villages that will be pulled together, or that is already being pulled together to constitute the Dholera Smart City. So, that 920 kilometers plan, which I discussed already with you in the last slide, which has to be completed by 2040. So, this Dholera village is one of the 22 villages which would be part of this Dholera Smart City. Now, if you take a look into the geographical and again ecological details, you will see that being as it is a low lying ecological area and as it is on the coast. So, it remains submerged under the sea for most of the times of the year, and every day at least 1 centimeter of its coastline is lost to the sea. This is a very, very crucial fact. And so far as like economic scenario is concerned, 47% of land in this village is agricultural, and 62% of residents they are occupied, they work in the agricultural sector. So, it is a high reliance on subsistence farming and minimum demand for industrial products. So, and we can also from this we can understand the mismatch between the official plan about the Dholera Smart City with Dholera village as the locus of this grand plan, and the actual realities that persist in the Dholera village. And also like this about so far as this controversial dam, Narmada Dam is concerned. So, when in 2006 the state promised that farmers will get water to irrigate their fields from the Narmada Dam, but unfortunately it remained faulty promise, and these people are also facing a lot of challenges and constraints from increased soil salination, and in the last few decades the agricultural productivity in this area has also declined. So, now if you take a look into the Dholera Smart City Plan, of course, you can understand it is a very costly plan with a cost around US 9 to 10 billion dollars, and who would be funding this project? So, there will be contribution from the Indian state and also several Japanese corporations including Hitachi, Mitsubishi Corporation, Toshiba, JGC and Tokyo Electric Power companies, but they will only be making 10% of the total contribution. The remaining 90% of the contribution will come from the private sector. So, the project has to draw a whole lot of corporate funding, and the project has to draw private investments, and drawing funds or drawing this attraction or making the private companies attracted to in this particular project remains a very, very important component so far as Dholera Smart City Plan is concerned. And yes, another crucial data is that so far as the smart city plan is concerned, in this planned city only 12% land will be then dedicated to agriculture. So, we can see a sharp reduction from the previously cultivated arable land to the plan to 12%, which is which means that that the farmland will be heavily transformed. So, there will be a significant land use and land cover change, also affecting the lives and livelihoods of laborers, agricultural laborers and farmers who are involved in this in the agricultural sector. So, the idea is to build Dholera Smart City in 3 phases by 2020. So, if you take a look into the official website, you will find that it says that the second phase has already started, it has already been initiated, and of course, the website is very positive about this grand idea, and it says that this will spearhead economic growth in the region, generating 0.8 million jobs and supporting 2 million inhabitants by the year 2040. So, this is from the Dholera SIR, which is this special investment region, I will shed light on what SIR is in the next couple of slides. And so it is a very ambitious grand plan, and bureaucracy and technocracy, they are really quite happy and proud about this particular plan. And if you see this quote in the orange box here, where I have quoted or here, where which I have taken from, borrowed from the official website of Dholera Smart City, you can see this remark actually reflects the pride and glory that is actually associated with this grand plan or project. So, you take a look into this quotation in this orange box. It says, Dholera, India's biggest, largest greenfield smart city, first ever of its kind to be developed in India, is being looked upon as the engine for economic resurgence, and is thus the development of it in an apt manner is capable of changing how future would perceive the country. So, I told you that it is hailed as the model of the smart city plan. The smart city credentials are being marketed by the global IT firm Cisco as a meshwork of fiber optic cables, sensors and cameras. So, there will be a central room to track citywide utility consumption and facilitating seamless integration of urban planning and digital technologies. And I think this illustration explains it well. So, how smart infrastructure, governance, mobility, living, technology and economy are being planned so far as Dholera Smart City is concerned. And of course, this eco-city ideal of which is being marketed by Cisco. So, it is not only an eco-city ideal, but you will also you can see a fusion of eco-city and networked city ideologies in the Dholera Smart City plan. So, which also means that if Dholera has to keep in tune to the eco-city status or idea, then range of renewable initiatives, low carbon footprint initiatives have to be part of this smart city plan. So, yes, if you go through the plan, you will see that a range of renewable energy initiatives and low carbon footprints have been planned for the smart city, and also some wildlife sanctuaries as eco-tourist spots have also been planned. Apart from this, like the city, the Dholera Smart City will have connected homes. So, placeless connectivity, if you remember from our previous lecture. So, it will definitely have connected homes, green residential spaces, futuristic malls and marketplaces, advanced mass rapid transit system and smart metering, and these are all these are the typical characteristics or attributes that actually define any smart city for that matter, because smart cities are technologically enabled, data centric, data driven discourse or design for that matter. So, and smart metering, it implies that infrastructures will be metered. So, there will be automatic or automated metering in terms of generating data so far as utilities are concerned, like water sanitation components of a particular city. So, everything will be smart. So, the the smartening idea and the smartening essence is very much infiltrated in this particular plan of the Dholera Smart City. Yes, this is a very important component, and the map, why I have put this map, because this Dholera Smart City is going to be, it's part of this influential corridor, which is the DMIC corridor, which means Delhi Mumbai Industrial Corridor. So, seduced by the urban pulse of the Tokyo Osaka Industrial Corridor, this DMIC has been planned. It's it's a very long, it's one of the longest stretch. So, the overall length between the overall length being 1483 kilometers, crossing like 6 states including Gujarat, and the whole idea is that it will interconnect, it will connect 4 mega cities, Kolkata, Mumbai, Delhi and Chennai. So, it is also considered to be one of the very influential projects of this golden quadrilateral. So, which is again which is the 5th largest highway that is being planned in the world, which will not only connect the 4 megacities of Mumbai, Kolkata, Delhi and Chennai, but it would also tap and harness the business opportunities by connecting the by connecting the peri-urban and rural areas, and by tapping on opportunities relating to commerce, education, health, etc. So, this is a grand project, and Dholera Smart City project is part of this grand and influential project called the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor. Yes. So, I already have discussed this, which I call slippery ontologies. So, what by slippery ontology I mean that, and this again I borrow from Ayana Datta, who says that Dholera was when initially the city was planned, it was not the smart city concept was not tagged to it, because the smart city idea was not there in India that much during that time. In 2009, for the first time when this project got the approval, and when the UK based global consultant, the UK based consultancy or consultant HALCO created the master plan, and it got approval from the government, from the Gujarat government. So, during that time, when the HALCO company drafted the design, so it was basically the term that they used was industrial township, right. But later what happened is that in 2012, in the first time in the TED talk by Amitav Kant, and who is Amitav Kant? He is one of the state officials who is involved in the DMIC project. So, Amitav Kant actually used this idea of smart growth, and how smart growth will actually shape Indian urban future, and he talked about 7 cities which actually also included Dholera. So, then we find the smart leveling on Dholera for the first time in 2012, and from there on the Dholera Smart City came to be conceptualized, and from industrial township the concept of smart city was kind of tagged with the urban development of this particular stretch or space. So, Ayana Datta talks about the genders that are there in terms of interchangeable usage of industrial and smart. So, Dholera we find slippery and ambiguous leveling, because sometimes it was previously it was projected or portrayed as industrial city, then an SIR, special investment region, knowledge city, global city, eco city, and now smart city. So, industrial, it basically kind of conveys that there is a kind of economic reasoning in the idea called industrial. But in smart, so smart is basically the globally marketable logic for attracting business and investment. So, and this becomes very clear, because if you see that these cities, or specifically the Dholera Smart City, it is not the vision of visionary architects and urban planners, but who are in control of design and implementation and everything for that matter. The entire, if you consider the entire ADDI phase, that is analysis, design, development, implementation and evaluation, you will see the prominent role of the corporate giants in this whole project, from initiation to the implementation level. So, this has become, this is a market for corporate giants like IBM, Cisco, Microsoft, Oracle, etc. And this is part of the Gujarat plan, and Gujarat is definitely an investor friendly state, and like when India was facing an economic downturn, and the annual growth rate of India between 2004-5 and 2011-12 was only 5%. Gujarat was, her economic or annual growth rate was quite steady. So, when the country level annual growth rate was 5% between 2004-5 and 11-12, Gujarat annual growth rate was 10%, and this growth rate or growth is actually reliant on 3 strategies, very interesting strategies of active lobbying and active lobbying for investment, the speed in the issuance of clearances for capital investment projects, and this we will see how when this SIR, special economic region concept was formulated, how this concept, the execution took place at a very high speed and efficiency. So, and also the third factor is or the third strategy is reducing what the corporate lobby again says quote unquote political interference or social resistance to development projects. And LAA, which is this Land Acquisition Act, to SIR, so special investment region. So, if we understand or properly if we are able to explore and capture this shift from LAA to SIR and what has been its implication or what would be its implication on the people, especially the socially vulnerable and marginalized sections, we can understand the complex politics and the complex social dynamics that is actual that are actually shaping this particular master plan on the Dholera Smart City. So, in 2009 this Special Investment Region Act was passed in Gujarat under the Gujarat Town Planning Scheme of 1976, and the whole idea is that so far as the SIR Act is concerned, so it says that development within Gujarat or any area of more than 100 square kilometer or industrial area with an area of 50 to 100 square kilometer can be considered within SIR. And this SIR very importantly, it actually bypasses India's 1894 Land Acquisition Act. So, the first two provisions, these have not been so much bypassed by SIR, but the last provision has been absolutely bypassed by SIR. So, what are the three provisions? The first provision is approval for acquisition for certain types of land. So, if you see the Land Acquisition Act of 1894, you will see that it says that if land has to be acquired for public purpose, here public purpose means if you want to construct an educational institution or housing or even some projects relating to rural planning, you can acquire land. So, you can acquire land for this public purpose, and then it mentions that land under multi-crop cultivation can be acquired only as the last resort. So, if no other patch of land is available or if no other alternative is available, then only you can acquire multi-crop cultivable land as the quote unquote last resort. And the final point is also very important, and in 2013 revisions it got a consolidated kind of consolidated brush of the stroke, where it says that when land is acquired for public purpose, then fair amount of compensation has to be given to the households losing land. And also the idea was to kind of to have consultation with local self-government institutions before this land allocation would start. But what we find in SIR is that unlike LA, the Gujarat Town Planning Scheme from which the SIR has been has emerged does not include compensation. It does not include compensation for land taken for public purpose, and this is dangerous. So, what is SIR? SIR is actually a capitalist tool to facilitate quicker acquisition without compensation. So, what has it crafted finally? It has actually crafted a regime of dispossession, or as Levian says, or as Dotto says, a regime of urbanization, where land is acquired for public purpose as capitalist space to attract private global capital. So, this is it, and so there has been a shift or a transformation from land for the market to a new model of land for urbanization through the active dispossession of those working and living in the rural periphery. So, this has generated, we remember immediately of Harvey, the geographer, the renowned Marxist geographer, who has talked about or who had talked about accumulation through dispossession, accumulation by dispossession. If you look into few works, or if you look into the recent scholarship, I mean, some of the researchers argue that this the land which are being acquired for public purpose, people or the farmers who are losing land, they are not protesting. So, I mean, this resistance or protest or aggression against this kind of social injustices, this has reduced, it no more kind of flood the Indian scene. But so far as this particular project is concerned, and so far as land acquisition for Dholera Smart City is concerned, we definitely this is dotted with a protracted struggle of fight for land rights and social justice. And one of the major farmer cooperatives who are very active, I mean the cooperative which is very active for this movement or resistance is this Zameen Adhikar Andolan Gujarat, which means land rights movement Gujarat. So, this is a 2000 coalition of farmer cooperatives, and if you see the social composition of Zameen Adhikar Andolan Gujarat, mainly they are the farmers are from scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and definitely they have success stories. So, in many cases we find that they have been quite successful in kind of, if not absolutely abandoning, but at least delaying projects. So, the continuous pressure is there, but also it is of course like any other resistance movement, is also entail the complex saga of continued struggle between the corporate lobby, the statecraft, and this the people who are dispossessed at the end of the day. So, continuous warrant are issued against activists, and sometimes if if through continued struggle they could actually convince the state to dole out some compensation means, but sometimes at times some of these compensations seem to be very faulty. And why faulty? Because in the same thing like many Jag farmers, they said and they protested in the public hearing, they mentioned that the EIA, which is his environmental impact assessment, all of us know that before implementing any particular project, now EIA has become mandatory, and this is not now, like this act was passed long back, 2-3 decades back, and so an environmental impact assessment is mandatory behind the implementation of any particular project. And this Jag farmers, they protested against this misinformation and misrepresentation of facts. So, how facts and data were actually manipulated by for example by Scene's consultants, which was the state appointed consultant who did the EIA for this Dholera Smart City project. And the kind of sometimes the kind of maps they used, these were extremely outdated. So, I mean, so in the maps you could see, so even 100 years old map. So, the maps which show areas as land, by now these areas already have been submerged under the sea. So, this is what I mean. So, one can understand that how this data is being manipulated to kind of cater to larger corporate needs. So, I mean, this is a question now, that whether it will be right to then consider EIA as a participatory assessment tool or a participatory tool through which the local communities can actually channelize their needs, their aspirations, their interests, or whether it should be considered as a top down bureaucratic arrangement. Unfortunately, I think very unfortunately the answer will be the second one. Now, apart from this misinformation and misrepresentation of facts, there are several other bottlenecks that this project already is dotted with. So, and this has been mentioned in the EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment Report, by Sen's consultants, and they say that that parts of these of the of the region are extremely vulnerable to high flood risks. So, at least 7 crore Indian rupee needs to be arranged for flood mitigation engineering or for implementing flood mitigation measures. So, it is a very this will become costlier because this high flood risk component is very much there. So, apart from there the project the project is also it is very close to the black buck habitat. So, which means that there will be an irreversible biodiversity loss when this project will actually be implemented. So, though the bureaucracy has remained quite apathetic and indifferent to these facts and data, but I mean they have glossed over these facts and data during public hearing, but this has been the reason behind withdrawal of several investors and some projects like the International Seaport, Kalpaksagar Dam project, etc. So, finally, I think this case study to a great extent, I mean it explains well that why this can be, I mean there is a whole lot of logic to kind of describe or explain it as a utopian experiment, and I borrow here absolutely totally from Ayana Dotto. And if you see these 3 very important remarks, I think you will be able to understand the annoyances, the exclusions and the fallacies in this kind of so called otherwise sophisticated techno managerial plans, schemes, initiatives, agendas and programs like the smart city. So, Dholera presents a new trend in city building in India that instead of addressing existing social exclusions actually reinforces long standing social inequities. Let us just think about the SIR and the shift from the LAA or to SIR, or maybe the distinction between LAA and SIR. So, how the SIR component has nothing, I mean the SIR does not say anything about compensation. So, there is no provision for compensation against land which will be acquired for public good. So, one can understand how this kind of project can actually reinforce social inequities further rather than addressing social exclusions. The second quote where Datta says, Dholera then is the new urban utopia whose fault lines are drawn in its very conceptualization, whose bottlenecks are written into the speed of its delivery, and whose materialization as smart city requires the active dispossession of marginalized citizens. It is very important for us to understand I mean to understand the fact that how many people, the most vulnerable, most marginalized sections of the society are actually becoming dispossessed to make way, or when the state is making way to these otherwise so called projected quote unquote lucrative projects. Lucrative for whom? Lucrative unfortunately for the rich private capitalist lobbies. And the last quote by I mean from Dotto here is, Dholera can be critiqued as reinforcing India's digital divide and promoting a panoptic urbanism. So, it provides a panoramic view for sure, but it does not take into consideration the nuances and nitty-gritties, the everydayness, the situatedness that kind of shape India's urban environmental and India's socio-environmental trajectory. So, I mean, so we can definitely understand the limits of this kind of doctrines and agendas. So, please go through these references, the most important being the second reference here by Ayana Dotto, New Urban Utopias of Post-Colonial India, Entrepreneurial Urbanization in Dholera Smart City, Gujarat. It came out in 2015 in the journal called, it is a very renowned journal, Dialogues in Human Geography, and you can also go through some other references that are here. So, I would like to conclude by saying that in this presentation I have used the case study based approach to develop a sharper understanding of the fallacies of contemporary urbanization, specifically the smart city doctrine. So, here in this presentation I have showcased Dholera as the first case study, and this will be followed by the next two case studies on Lavasa and Rajarhat. And finally, I have drawn from Anna-Dotto, and I have discussed why and how the Dholera Smart City Plan is a utopian urban experiment. So, fantasy city, failing to cater to basic social and urban and environmental needs, requirements, aspirations, imperative for any urban project. So, it is important for you to really delve deep in this particular line of direction. Thanks.